let's say I create one of those objects, and now I come over here and I want to insert another object, another shape. So this time I'll put maybe a line here. So I'll take a line, and then I can create a line, which is kind of fun, and I'll create the line. And then I want to create, and I'll just stay on this page. I create a triangle. Well, now here's a triangle, and I can create an arrow, and I can create an arrow. So I've got these shapes, right? Now the problem is, if I start resizing and formatting this particular shape, what happens? Well, it kind of, pretty much, unless I select this one and then hit Control and select this one and this one and this one, and then I have to come up here and group these together, which I can, which is, it takes a little bit of time, especially if you have, about 15 objects. You got to control and click and do all that. Well, you can group these together, and once I've grouped these together, guess what? Now, when I make any changes to the size, look how as I click one of these anchor points and change it, look at that. It changes all of them at the same time. So I can create a, slightly smaller version of this. So we can do that. Now that's one way of doing that. But that means I have to collectively group and do all these. And of course now, if I do any changes to the actual objects, it changes it on all of them. So we can see that's done because of the grouping. Now if I want to, I can simply come up here and click Ungroup. And that will now break them up into their individual pieces. So we can see that. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these by simply hitting the delete key, and then show you what I was talking about utilizing the drawing canvas. So what's the big deal with having the drawing canvas? Well, if you remember in the Word 2003, anytime you did an auto shape, like what we've been doing, these basic shapes, it automatically created the drawing canvas, and it kind of scared people a little bit. Because when you did that, it just kind of pops out. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, the drawing canvas helps keep the parts of the drawing together. You can help position the drawings together onto the page, and it provides a frame-like boundary between your drawing and the text on the page. So it kind of makes the graphic almost stand out. It's almost like having its own little, like taking a photograph is how I would like to say, and you're kind of pasting it on there, and in that photograph you might have several objects. Well, that's, it's on top of the text. Now, someone says, well, Chris, can't you just do that with the objects themselves? Absolutely, but with the actual frame and the drawing canvas, you can then, add a shadow to it and, do some kind of, cool things to it, okay? But let me show you how that works, because some people do prefer that. Now, you can set this up so that anytime I go to Insert and I go to Shapes and I select one of these shapes, that it automatically creates the drawing canvas. Now, to do this, you need to go over, of course, it's an option. The way you do this is you click on the Office button. You go to Word Options, and so we'll come down over here and scroll it down so you can see it. Click the Advanced button, and then here under Editing Options, check this right here. Automatically create drawing canvas when inserting auto shapes. So that means anytime I click on one of those drawing shapes or these auto shapes, it creates the drawing canvas. I personally don't like doing that, so I'm going to leave mine off. However, if you do want to do that, you can set it. Now, in this case, if I click on the shapes and I click the new drawing canvas, watch what happens. Boom! See, this thing appears. That's why some people don't like it, because it moves the text, and it kind of, and yes, you can adjust that and have text just because, this is an object just like any other drawing object. But this can, be modified, and you can even resize it. So if I, resize it here, I can scroll it down. Well, now it's its own little object. Now, what I can do, obviously, is I can still draw my shapes here. So I can go and create a rectangle, and I can come over here and create maybe a down arrow. So here's the down arrow, and I can create a little triangle. And so you can see that these objects are now on the drawing canvas. And now if I move the drawing canvas, and I simply come over here and see how when I roll it over, my mouse changes to the 4 arrows, and I move it, watch what happens. All my objects move with the drawing canvas. I don't have to go in and individually set each one of these, do this and hit control and group them in order to move them at the same time. I can just move the canvas. So that's one advantage. Yeah, it might be a good advantage for some people, but I'm kind of, I'll just go ahead and select those. But if you had a huge amount of these, especially when you start adding lines, or here's one line here, and here's another line here, and then here's another line here, and here's an arrow that I want to use, yada, yada, yada. Well, now you have all these objects. Well, to go in and individually click Control, 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 and select all these just to move something. Oy vey, that's hard. But now, because they're all on this canvas, I can move them, and they're going to move with me. So that's one advantage of using the drawing canvas, and moving it wherever you want it, to be. And so I click and hold it and move it back here. So that's what the drawing canvas allows us to do. But other than that, I mean, you still select something here on the drawing canvas. I can come up here and, change it and, make some changes to it, add some shadow effects, do some fun stuff with that. I can, take the arrow here, and one of the things you can do is the arrows have different types of arrows. So I can come over here to arrows and say, you know what, I want one with a little diamond on the end of it, or a circle. How do you want that to be? Or diamond to diamond. You can make those changes, and now I've got a different arrow. And so any arrows that you draw. And by the way, there are some incredible cool things that you can do with these basic shapes. So, like for example, we want to do a banner year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select here in the drawing canvas. Now watch this. If I delete the drawing canvas, oops, all of those are, objects I created are gone. Well, what if I want to keep a couple of them on here and not, lose them when I delete the drawing canvas? Well, here, let me undo here. If you select this and you move it off of the drawing canvas and you drop it right there, it is now not on the drawing canvas. It is actually on the document itself. See, there's the drawing canvas. Now, when I hit delete, guess what? My triangle stays because it was taken off. So we'll go ahead and delete that. But I want to go ahead and add a banner here because we're talking about the banner year for Acme Musical Instruments. So I come up here. I'm going to place it right here. I'm going to go ahead and hit Insert. I'm not going to use a drawing canvas. I'm just going to use my simple. I come down here and check this out. Stars and banners. So I can come over here. And I like banners, and so I'll go ahead and pick, this is a good one, the vertical scroll. So I go ahead and insert a vertical scroll, and I come in and I put it in, and I drop it down. Now notice that the object automatically, the way it's set up for text wrapping is, guess what? In front of text. So that's the thing. Now if I go ahead and I say, well, I want it tight, now the sales results are going to come in, and you can still do all the changes that you normally do in line with text, whatever you want to do. Now I've got my banner here, and well, let's say I want to put some text on here. How would I do that? Yeah, you got it. I'm just going to insert a text box. So I take a text box, and now I can create this text box right here, and I can say 2008. So I can do there we go. Got a couple of those. Now I highlight this, and I can still do my font changes. I can say, well, I want to change it to, maybe a Bauhaus. Change it to that, and I'm going to make it 12, so it's a little bigger, and I want to change the color. So you can do the formatting that you see that we saw with the text boxes within the object on top of objects. And so now I'm going to go ahead and change it to, big red, nice and red. Okay, now we click off of that. Now you notice, though, it's got this box around it. I'm like, I don't want that box. Select the object, and of course you can then format this object by right-clicking on it if you want. And, doing that, select here, right-click on the format the auto shape. Select the format here. What do you want it to do? And then, of course, if you go to Text Box Tools Format, here is where I can select and say, well, I don't want a line around it. Well, right now, I've got an outline, right? So I want no outline. Click no outline, and now there's my 2008. I can take my auto shape and, scroll it down a little bit if I want, so it can fit and, everything look good. So you have all those settings. So these are just ways that we can manipulate utilizing these basic shapes in order for us to create some really cool things. Now, another one that we want to do and show you is, of course, word art. Now, that's been around for a long time, but it's still just as useful as it was back then. With word art, you can do some really cool text banner type of things. You can grow the text bigger from one end to the other, or maybe in the middle. It can be three-dimensional. It can change color from one letter to another. I mean, there's some really cool things to do. Again, this is going to be up on our insert. And then you'll notice that we have all the fun stuff that we've seen here. Now, Smart Art, you might think, oh, is that what it is? No, that's going to be in our next nugget when we talk about diagrams and charts. because those are these two. Over here, you have your text box, and there it is, word art. When I click on word art, it's going to allow me to select which one I want to utilize. And there's all kinds that we can do. In fact, I think that this would be kind of a cool one right here, this word art style 27. And so I click on it, and what that does is it brings up the word art text dialog box. Now by default it's going to choose a font, but you remember your mileage may vary. What do you want it to be? You can change whether it's the impact font or something else. The effect will still be applied. Impact works just as well as anywhere. So let's say instead of using this header down here that I have, my heading 2 sales result, I want to put sales results with word art. So I say sales results. Okay, so now I've got sales results. That's what it's going to say. I then click OK, and boom, there it is, sales results, which is kind of cool. Now, like any object, I of course get my little object boundary, and if I click on any of the anchors, I can resize what it looks like. I can, make it a little smaller. I can widen it a little bit, and it kind of shows you the shape and how it's going to change. So these are just some of the things that we can do to kind of make any changes for that. Now, if I want to, you can go ahead and make other changes if you want to make the the format. And if you'll notice, I've got my word art styles here where I can look at maybe some of the different ways it can appear. I can also edit the text. If I go, I misspelled, results. Well, if I click on edit text, it'll bring back my edit word art text. Okay, looks good. I can add the spacing. If I right now it's normal. If I want to go a little looser, very loose, or tight, I can change the spacing between the characters. So, if I want to go a little bit tighter, you notice it now tightened up a little bit of the look. Or I can say, no, normal is fine, and so now the spacing between the actual characters in this 3D world are, a little bit more apart. You can change things like the even height. You want to change whether it's vertical text with letters stacked on top. And all of these things built together help create the shadow effects, the 3D effects, the fills, create these pre-built. Now you, of course, can make subtle changes to any of this at any point in time. So you never have to worry about that. Like if you don't like the color of the fill, all you need to do is come up over here and say, well, I want the fill, instead of being what it is, I can change it to more of a blue. I like the this color or that color, and you can change the fill color on the actual object itself. So instead of kind of like that white, gray, silver, right now we're using more of a gradient. So you can change the gradient on that. So all the things that you normally can do with your objects, you can do here with word art. That's what makes it kind of cool. And so you can, change the different looks, the feels, and you can even change the shape of it. Like if you don't like this one and you want to make a change to it, so I'll click off of here. You just click here on the shape, change the word art shape, and here is where you can now, kind of form it a little bit differently, however you want it to look. You can make it follow a certain pattern, sales results, so like a circle or a curve, or, you want to make it turn around in a little kind of a ring. You can do all these things and make the changes, and again, this is what is so powerful about Word 2007 and any of the Office products, is that you get that instant preview right there. So you can just kind of come look at it. By the way, if at any point in time this is kind of, one of these things comes down and it blocks what it is you're trying to preview, remember, you can still move this down a little bit, and then now, guess what? It now appears down there. So you can maneuver the actual document itself, so that way you can see what the real-time preview looks like. So we like kind of like the way it is, or maybe you want to change it. Oh, that one's kind of cool. We'll do a curve down. So we'll do the curve down. It then makes the changes. Bada bing, bada boom, and we're ready to go. So these are going to be word art. So now let's say I want this word art to appear over here instead. Now of course I can just simply click on the object and move it and put it in front of the sales results, which is kind of neat. And then I can come over here and I can simply remove the sales results. If I need to resize it or have the text come around it, I can do that as well. So these are just kind of ways to do it. Now, one last thing I want to show you in this video, in this nugget, is one thing you might find on that exam that you might want to take. And that is one of the nifty little things that I guess Microsoft really likes